So I would just say again, thank you for allowing us to be here, Paige. I'm Paula Edwards-Gayfield, and we'll get started. As Paige mentioned, there could be some questions, but also wanting to give Alexandra and Kendra the opportunity to speak to this. And my first question to both of you all is why do this? Like, why? I know, Alexandra, you mentioned at the beginning sort of the sense of acknowledging shame and really trying to remove the stigma of mental health and eating disorders from anyone's conversation. But also, is there anything else that you would add to why this was a really important project for you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much, everyone, for being here, for sharing in our journey and our story. I'm really excited to be chatting with everyone today. I will address that question first, I guess, by saying one of the most, the paper bag story. That was a story that my mom actually used to tell me when I grew up, and I think there's a lot of tie-in with that paper bag story to the organization, to the journal activity that we do later, but also to the story, the narrative that was just told. And I think for me, what I've realized is when I look at every other individual, is every person in a sense is a paper bag where you really can't see what's going on the inside. You know, it's not plastic, it's not see-through. There's so much happening for every individual that you're not going to know unless you want to, unless you if you connect with that person and they share with you what's inside that paper bag. But I think it's so important to just acknowledge that everybody has a paper bag, and to realize that everybody has something inside it. You don't know what's inside it, you don't know how much is inside it, but there's something inside it for every individual. And I think for me, that's why I do this, because I want to encourage every person out there, and I want to continue myself to acknowledge that paper bag that everybody else has. And I want everyone to realize that they're not alone, because that's kind of this almost secret to that I felt Kendra and I had discovered in treatment when we connected so deeply with each other. We were finally able to start connecting with ourselves too. Um, and I'll add to that later that we're always very transparent and honest on this panel that we still struggle too, and that's okay. Also, I think everybody has their own journey, and I think the whole point of this is just being open and honest about being human.
Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. The paper bag of, we always think someone else's life is like a little bit better, or or even just the belief that I am the only one that's experiencing this. And so it's such a great message to remember. Kendra, why was this important for you?
Yeah, well, first, thank you, Paula, and to the Fierce Lab organization for having us today. This was important to me because mental illness conversations, talk about struggling, wasn't conversation in my community. It wasn't, it was all spiritual based, or take it to God or pray about it, but not how do you actually cope with a mental illness? How do you acknowledge a mental illness and then cope with it and accept it, and all of those factors. So I found myself going through that process quite on my own in terms of the community that I came from. And so not wanting that same pattern to continue for somebody else that's a part of my community or any community to feel so isolated in their experience. And then addition to that, just what Alexandra was speaking on, the secretness of struggling, and just knowing from experience that silence can kill, and wanting to be a part of using my voice to claim my life force and to say that, like, I have this voice and I have this power and I'm here to share it and help others. So
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting, like you stated, Kendra, as you said that, something popped into my mind about the silence kills. And, at the beginning of the film, as some of the comments were rolling, I don't know if all of you caught this or not, but eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate than any other mental health concern. And it says like every 52 minutes, seconds, someone is dying as a result of an eating disorder. And I state that because unfortunately, and I really do mean unfortunately, eating disorders is not what's on the death certificate. It's heart failure, it's organ failure, it's suicide, it's so many things. And to think about maybe Mental Health Awareness Month, it just brings this conversation forward and just reminding us of the importance of anyone's particular struggle. Alexandra and Kendra, this is both to you. Both of you have kind of shared a little bit about sort of the shame or the silence and the reluctance, I guess, to discuss it in your communities. When I guess first, did you share with your supports? And then what was that like for you? What did it take?
When I first, well, I'll start by saying I didn't even know that I had an eating disorder because I had learned about it in high school. It was a textbook definition of an eating disorder that didn't match what I was experiencing because, surprise, it typically doesn't. Eating disorders come in many different shapes and sizes, quite literally, and they don't match what they're not cookie cutter. So I didn't even know that I had an eating disorder. I knew that I was struggling with something. I knew internally that something did not feel good. Something felt different. Something felt wrong. I spoke up about it, and initially I was told by my family that I was fine. So that it was not that it was a lie, but just no, you're fine. There's nothing wrong. I went to seek help. Eventually, it was acknowledged by my family, but I was told, we'll get help, but it was with this air of, but just don't say it outside of the household. Don't let anybody know, but we'll figure it out. We'll take care of it. A lot of mixed messaging, which led to truly a lot of shame. Shame that I was the only one in my family that struggled. Shame that I was the only one that that wasn't perfect. When in fact, that even within my family dynamics, within my family, every single individual struggles. And I'll say now that I have been vocal about it, there have been many that have come to me. Some that have not been vocal with the whole family, but many who have come to me individually to say, I just wanted to let you know that I struggle a lot with XYZ, and thank you for saying it. I can too. Now to you. And so they've connected with me very personally on that. And so I know logically now that I'm not the only one, but it really did feel like that for a long time.
Yeah, thank you. Kendra.
Yeah, I'll jump in with that. That shame piece was very prevalent for me and at the start of my journey and all throughout really, but particularly at the start of the journey, I had trouble accepting that I had an eating disorder. I was going through these steps of, seeing a therapist who recommended me to a doctor who recommended me to a treatment center. And the whole time I was keeping this from my parents, keeping this from my family, friends, loved ones of all sorts, because I felt like if I didn't speak about it, then maybe it just wouldn't be real. And I could keep it under the radar like I'd done for a vast majority of my life. Like if I can just stay low key, like it'll be okay. And so when I did go into a residential center, I kind of presented it to my family as if it were going to be like a summer camp. Like I was just going away for a little while. I'm just like, but I'll be back. It'll be okay. And that was really the shame of not wanting to say that I'm actually really struggling. And so it was definitely, I think, a shock for my whole family, including myself, because it was just such a unheard of experience. And likewise, I felt like nobody in my family had that same struggle, or if they did, then why wasn't it a problem for them and why was it for me? And all of those things that come with it. But shame was definitely had its hooks in the process early on.
Yeah, as both of you are talking about shame, I think about some of how we're supposed to be. And I think about some of the archetypes, such as like a strong Black woman. And even if no one has ever said that to you, you know, how do you adopt those messages, Alex? I think about also just in general, being a woman, you're supposed to be a caretaker, you're supposed to have, you know, all of these things. And if you don't fit into these molds, not even connecting it back to mental health just yet, how do you start to embrace some of these identities? And then if they're identities that don't really align with how your family may think, is that something that becomes problematic? Just kind of more of a comment than anything else.
Well, I mean, touching on that too, I think, at least for me, one thing that I think really was at the core of my disorder was this deep, deep need and want and longing to be belonging and to
Mhm.
be accepted and to be a part. The ironic thing is we're all looking towards others, towards what is normal and right. And then the further ironic thing is our heroes and the ones that we look up to are typically the ones who are different, who
Mhm.
don't exemplify the typical qualities that we. So the whole thing is just very ironic, but it's so real inside our heads. We just want to belong.
I didn't want to go without making this comment. Alex, you mentioned earlier as well, um, about eating disorders and not looking a certain way, and you as well, Kendra, and not like sort of fitting in the mold. And I think that is such an important message to anyone that's out there listening or watching, because I think I would say, I believe anyway, when people think about eating disorders, they think about anorexia nervosa, they think about the picture seems to be the individual that may need such a significant higher level of care than even what's depicted in Blackbird, excuse me. But also that message of then, well, you're not sick enough, you're not okay, but yet here's this struggle that you're having, and it could be a significant struggle. And so what do you say to not only individuals who may be struggling, but also to providers?
Kendra, I don't know if you want to touch on that, if you want me to.
You take it first.
Sure. Um, to individuals, I mean, for one, I think it's so difficult because, like mentioned, not every struggle looks the same. And I'm not here, Kendra's not here, Paula, even you're not here to tell someone in this room whether or not they have an eating disorder. Um, and I think even, um, I think it's really tough, but I think what really matters is internally, do you feel happy for you? Do you feel peaceful? Do you feel like if there's a relationship with food, a relationship with your body, reoccurring thoughts, you know, whether or not it's defined as an eating disorder, we don't have to label it in this moment with anything. But if you feel like there's something that just doesn't feel like you and your optimal you, then I think that's something worth exploring at the end of the day. And I don't know if that exactly answers your question, Paula, but that's
It
kind of my view.
absolutely does. It definitely does. And not, this is not a plug, but I think sometimes even the benefit of having some support groups that sort of focus and allow that opportunity to, for someone who may be questioning, not quite sure, don't really know if I have an eating disorder, but I have these thoughts and I'm engaging in some behaviors or something doesn't quite feel right. Having an opportunity without any sort of commitment initially to speak with the provider and explore some of those concerns.
Uh, if there's anything that I would add, I think it's for both individuals and providers that this is such a nuanced realm of recovery, of treatment, of discovery, of exploration of life. You know, it can be so comprehensive and all encompassing. And because of that, the most effective way of treatment or recovery for you or is not going to necessarily be the same that it is for me or for Alex or for Paula. And so remembering that as an individual that you have individual needs that may not be aligned with the status quo or the book or the standard. And so just being able to allow yourself to be beyond the textbook and saying that like I'm still worthy of figuring this struggle out, or even if you can't feel that yet, because I know that's difficult, but just saying that there's more than one option, there's more than one way, and just exploring what those could be.
Essentially shedding shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to add too, just like a quick little nugget, a little story. But one thing for me, and this is outside of just the eating disorder, this is general mental health. But one thing that started to make a difference for me and make me kind of realize and acknowledge that maybe everything was not, that maybe I was disconnecting a little bit and not addressing everything that was happening for me. When my friends started asking me on the phone, how's it going? How are you? And actually, Kendra and I did this yesterday. We do this every time we talk on the phone, and I love this. Instead of just saying good, if you take a minute to actually think about that question. And so when Kendra and I, again, do this every time we're on the phone, we always, even if it's business related, start with, how are you? And usually it then ends up in an hour tangent where we both talk about what's going on in our lives. But it's real, and it's a moment in our day when we can actually dig inside, dig internally and see, how am I really? And that can be both. That can be, I'm really good, but also I'm kind of nervous and anxious and my stomach hurts because I just had this happen and I feel really weird about it. But also there are these positives and I'm happy. It can be both. You can hold both spaces, but I think that's a really nice exercise to just go a little bit deeper than disconnecting and shutting it off and just saying, I'm okay, or I'm good, because there's a lot
And may I
happening.
add something to that? That's a great point, Alex, is that I don't know, but I know it doesn't feel good. Like, I don't feel internally. So I don't really know how I'm doing, or I don't know how I'm feeling, but internally I'm feeling that, what do you say, like disconnected or over something, it's too easy for me to keep going to feeling and emotion words as a therapist. And so I'm trying to stay away from that. But, just knowing something's just not right.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes Kendra and I actually do respond with just a, like a, "Ugh."
Yeah. I'm like, I feel you.
Yep.
Again, acknowledging that, hey, we know our paper bags, right? That I'm not alone in this. Someone somewhere may have a similar experience.
Yeah. 100%.
I know we can go further with questions. Absolutely, Kendra and Alex and I can talk forever, but I didn't know if there were any. Are we taking questions now also from the audience? Or were you wanting to start with the journal prompt? I apologize. Just wanted to make sure.
Checking in with Paige here. Paige, if you're okay. I don't know if it was just to me, but Paige says either works.
Okay.
So yeah, I think if we have questions from any of the viewers.
Mm-hmm. While we're waiting for questions, what has been the impact of this tour? What's been the impact of this message, that each of you have experienced thus far?
Well,
I have, oh, sorry. No, go ahead, Kendra.
thank you.
This is us. I personally have experienced every individual on this tour, as has Kendra. We read every single journal response that we get back from the tour. It's been very personal and very intimate, and really, I deeply hold every single individual that sits in this audience. In the back of the room, especially, there are a lot of people who will come and chat with us, whether it's privately chat with us or have an open conversation with anybody that's there. But a lot of individuals that are realizing for the first time that they might struggle with general mental health, with an eating disorder. It's not always eating disorder specific, but a lot of individuals that have never explored journaling before, have never explored their own mental health. So really seeing that world open up for someone, and it's not always easy, because sometimes it gets messy before it gets clean. It gets harder before the healing begins, and so that's really hard to experience as well. But I know how important it is. And typically for our events, We have, and unfortunately this is virtual, so we don't have it now, but in our in-person events, we have a resource fair set up in the back of the room after everybody exits the event. And it's local, national, and sometimes college campus resources when it's on a college campus. And so that is an opportunity right there on the spot for everybody in the audience to interact with all of these resources so that it's not as overwhelming. And they can actually find what path might work best for them, whether that's therapy, treatment, whether that's just picking up a mental health checklist or a brochure that talks about different resources to explore later. But there's help right on the spot. And so I have firsthand seen that impact for so many individuals.
Great, thank you. What about you, Kendra?
Likewise, the impact has been very broad and expansive. Not just like outside of myself, I'm talking just like internally. This whole process has been life-changing in the sense that I was a very isolated and closed off person, and this has really brought me out of my shell in so many different ways, and really solidified my desire for advocacy and my passion for raising awareness in communities. And then it's the conversations afterwards, like Alex was saying, that people come up and just say, like, I've struggled with that, or I didn't know that somebody else struggled with that, or I know someone who struggles with that, or just that seeing that process of their connection to the story is encouraging to myself to say, like, no, keep going. Because sometimes I get in my own head about, am I doing the right thing? Am I saying too much? Am I not? Just all of the questioning. And so, and especially like not all of the feedback and stuff has been great, but I will say especially for feedback that has come from men who are struggling with an eating disorder, or and that's just because of what we were talking about earlier, how eating disorders are often understood to be, but it's very much so an inclusive disease of anybody. And yeah, so that impact is what sticks out to me.
Yeah, great. As you said that, you made me think about someone from the very first one that we did, Alexandra. That was a male who came and talked to me about sort of the cycle that he would engage in. There are some questions that I definitely want to ask or read them for answers. As each of you were talking, I was thinking about how vulnerable this required you to be, but acknowledging their strength and vulnerability. And that really is often opposite than what we're taught and, or we learn along the way. And so I just thank each of you for your willingness to display your vulnerability, which again, I think is such a strength for people to possess.
And I do see, I think it's not in the chat, but it's in the Q&A section.
I didn't know if you were going to say something more, but yeah, so a couple of questions.
Oh, yeah.
One, the first one, how do you encourage your kids to really share how they are doing? And then what signs should parents or siblings look for? Anything that you each would share?
Well, first I'd say to how do you encourage your kids to really share how they are doing? By showing them, by showing and sharing how you yourself are doing, and showing them that that's okay to talk about how they're doing, whether that's good, whether that's bad, whether that's whatever it is, just like modeling that practice of openness is very, very much so influential in people's lives, not just kids, but around you too.
That was going to be my answer, 100%. Exactly. If you're feeling hurt and want to cry, and explain why. And I think don't be afraid to be vulnerable yourself. 100% lead by example.
Yeah, I think about just the normalizing, which is what each of you stated, normalizing emotions, like the emotional experiences that we all, and I can acknowledge that there could be boundaries, right? For parents, it's going to be what's okay to share versus what isn't, but really normalizing that and honoring the authentic sort of emotional response that occurs. I think also acknowledging or maybe sharing with your kids that this is a space that it's okay to share. Like, I want to support you. And I would say keep saying it, not in a way that it's like pushy, but creating the space that you're actually inviting them, that they really know, okay, no matter what it is, you can talk with me about this and we will try and figure it out. This is not theirs. Even though I recognize like some may say that, it's not just theirs. Eating disorders impact the entire family. And then being able to show them that you're along, along for the ride, so to speak, with them. And then anything about signs and symptoms. I mean, I can definitely speak to that, but I don't know if you all had any comments to that
Yeah.
as well.
I wasn't sure if that was a question specifically about eating disorders or general mental health. So it could, of course, it could look different in both spaces, either or.
Mhm.
Um, but I was just going to say to that, and I'm not a parent, but I do have two younger sisters who are much younger than me that I watched grow up, and I knew them very well, and I could intuitively sense and see when one of them started to struggle, because I just noticed these little differences, a little more silence than usual. For one of them, she had started developing hair picking a little bit, but just these little nuanced actions that were different than what I had experienced in her before. And that didn't necessarily mean, okay, there's something wrong, but it could. And so then opening up that safe space with her, sharing with her some of the different things that I've gone through, noticing the response before necessarily saying, tell me what's wrong or what is wrong, but just noticing, taking some time to just notice, I think, would be what I would say. And I know that's not specific in terms of symptoms per se or actions, but noticing differences.
Mhm. Yeah. No pressure, but anything you'd add, Kendra?
No, I think that was very accurate. Sometimes, a lot of the times, actually, they will be subtle differences. It won't necessarily be something dramatic, um, and that is, especially in my experience of eating disorders, that was part of the secrecy. Was trying so hard not to let anything be flagged, or be seen as like, oh, okay, she's acting differently or she's experiencing things differently. So it would really take that careful attention and often like intuition to know that, like, let me just take some time to check in with them a little bit more and just maybe not directly address it, but just be there and make yourself available as someone who's there to support and who's willing to be supportive, whatever that looks like for that individual.
Yeah. I would add to that too. I like that both of you stated subtle differences. And I think about someone who may already be an introvert, may already be quiet, may already kind of just be in their room. And then I think even more so for those types of things, because I think it's easy to say, oh, well, that person has always been that way. But you still may notice it a little bit more or around certain situations that you possibly did not before. Speaking to eating disorders specifically, sort of signs and symptoms, I would state any changes in their eating patterns, whether it's, oh, I already ate earlier, they're not eating with you. It could be eating alone, or I just want to eat in my room. And what I am saying about all eating disorder presentations, not just one in particular. There may be, you find like wrappers in the garbage that maybe, you just went grocery shopping. I don't know what today is, Tuesday, Saturday, and some things are now gone. And so just really paying attention. Do they want to hang out with their friends or with you all when it's around meal times? Are they refusing to sort of go out? I would also state, like, does everything else sort of take precedence? I think about people who are like have to exercise and they're driven and the exercise is obsessive. How much is that behavior impacting their lives? Thinking about some of the social situations that also by default get impacted as well.
I'll add to that also. This was in my experience. I again didn't know that I had an eating disorder. I didn't know why this was happening. I knew I was leaving a lot of social events because I didn't have the energy and fuel to keep me there. And I had rules in my mind about, late nights and what I could have and timing and all of that. And I think that is sometimes a common experience uh, amongst the eating disorder community is leaving social at events for different reasons, whether it's for the reason that I did or elsewhere. But I think it's that disconnect from social activity um, to remain hidden and to keep the eating disorder safe. Honestly, so that could be a sign as well.
Thank you. This is another question, when you have days when you're really struggling, what is the best way that you cope or just simply make it through the day?
For
Kendra,
me,
sorry, go ahead. No,
for
I'm
me,
just
it's
asking.
yeah. For me, it's walks, sunshine, and sometimes giving myself a time for a reset, like a new day in the same day. Sometimes I'll say, okay, I know this game, I know exactly what this is going to look like for the next 3 hours. My mind's going to spiral. I'm going to be miserable. At 6 p.m., I'm probably going to be fine. So that's my reset. That's my kind of new day in the same day. That's just what works for me. And then in the moment, in those 3 hours, I always know that I need to just get outside, sunshine, take a walk. I personally, it affected me so much that I actually made the active decision to move somewhere where sunshine exists a lot. There are cities that I love that I just won't be able to live in, at least right now, because that's not, it doesn't work for me to be in an area that's cold and doesn't have sunshine. That's what I need. But yeah, that's mine.
Yeah.
And on top of that, because I definitely ditto the fresh air, it does wonders for the brain.
Yeah.
On top of that, sometimes like when I'm really struggling, it's the incessant thoughts that I just like can't seem to get like around or in front of or away from. And I need something to like really interrupt that thought flow. And music has done that for me in so many ways. I have certain playlists that I can go to when I'm feeling a particular way. And that's actually one of the tools I learned in treatment was like creating different, not necessarily mood playlists, but transition playlists that like by the time I get to like the end of the playlist, I'm in a different emotional state than where I started. And so just letting that outside external guide like come into my head and help me breathe, especially if I'm listening to music while I'm outside taking a walk or something, could be pretty beneficial on those days. And then talking about it, not just ignoring it like it didn't happen. So
yeah.
Kendra, I love that. I love that strategy and tool too, because I think it almost forces your brain to focus on something other than what it's a point of focus. And when you're really paying attention to that playlist and listening, it's both the playlist and your brain's actual intent to focus on something outside of the struggle. It's a really smart tool.
Yeah, thank you. So we have one, we can answer this one really quickly before we move to the journaling activity. How can I support a parent who is struggling, again, with an eating disorder? Any thoughts you would share?
I don't know specific to the parent space, but I can share that I've had a lot of hurt happen, hurt towards others from me and hurt towards me from others when I started to struggle again. I had some close friends that we had parted ways, and that hurt a lot, I think, on both ends. It's really hard to see someone struggle again because I think from the outside, you're looking at it saying, why can't they just get better? And from the inside, we're also looking at it feeling, why can't we just get better? And there's a lot of shame that comes with that doesn't need to be there because this is so real and nobody asks for this to happen. And so I think first to acknowledge that for a parent, for a child, for anybody who is struggling again, they're not wanting that. They're not asking for that. In fact, it might even be more difficult the second time around because now they know the secret of what is happening. They know the secret to recovery too, yet they're still feeling it again. And it's equally as real that time. So I think patience and understanding around it. I don't know that I'm personally in a position to give specific advice past that, but just from lived experience with going through that again piece, I would have really, really loved just patience and understanding, and maybe just acknowledgement. We see that it's happening again. We see the struggle. We see how real it is. Can we help you help you? And what can we do for that? I think that would have been helpful for me, at least.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. And if needed, we can always answer a question and give a little bit more support after this. And so we want to go ahead and introduce the journaling activity, acknowledging time. And so Alex or Kendra, which of you are going to be sharing that?
Kendra, would you like to introduce the journal activity today?
Oh, okay. So we invite you all to participate in our Shed Shame Journal Anthology, where you anonymously fill out one of these journal prompts as honestly as you desire to. And the hope is that when another audience comes in and these responses are shared, that it can help somebody find connection and find community and find that value in their own story. So we hope that you will participate and post, if you feel comfortable to do so, with the hashtag #ShedShame after this event. How did I do, Alex?
And you did amazing. Forgive me, if I disappeared. You did amazing. That was a beautiful, beautiful description of the journal prompt. And my computer's a little bit slow, but the journal prompt can be found on our website. It is, I'll just type it here for everyone, www.projectblackbirdinc.org. The journal prompt is right there on the front page of our website. There's a section that you can pledge your response. And then, as Kendra mentioned, after you do so, if you would like to share it on social media, or even just share it with us privately, you can share it with our social media account, which I'll type in here too, Project Blackbird Film. And then with the hashtag, as Kendra and I have, hashtag #ShedShame, to show your support for mental health awareness, especially in a Mental Health Awareness Month.
Great. Thank you both. I really appreciate every time I do this with you all, the opportunity and just the honest conversation, and just allowing us to communicate to anyone who is listening the importance of shedding shame, acknowledging mental health impacts any and everyone, and you're not alone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Paula, you are a beautiful moderator. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And then Kendra and Alexandra, just thank you so much for sharing your story. I wrote so many nuggets down, but one that really stuck with me was the being intentional about asking, how are you? Because I think so many people, whether you're starting a phone call, a business meeting, really just any conversation, that's typically your first line is, how are you? But either if you're responding, you're not honest, but if you're the listener, sometimes you're not intentional about really asking how someone's doing. You're just doing it because you feel like you need to. So just being open that when you are asking that, are you ready to receive what someone's going to say? And you don't have to have the answers, but just allowing that space for someone to say, I don't know, or something feels off. So that one really stuck out to me. So I appreciate you guys sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that thought too. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for a really beautiful conversation. So at Fierce Lab, we love supporting other organizations, and I know we're trying to find many ways to continue to work with Project Blackbird, especially as we are both embarking on college tours this fall. But we encourage you to support Project Blackbird by visiting their website. We dropped it in the chat. I'll make sure it's also included in our post-event email. Follow them on social media. I know all of these ladies are here to be resources for you, or just if you want to learn more about what they're doing in that space, they're doing incredible work. So we do encourage you to support them like we're going to continue to support them. But again, thank you so much for everyone for joining us. Stay tuned for future announcements on our next Lunch and Learn. We are going to continue the theme of mental health in the month of May. But that doesn't mean May is the only month to talk about this. This is a key pillar for Fierce Lab. We will continue to provide resources for our community. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.